Senator Johnson, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Picking up a little bit with what Senator Carp was talking about of cooperation, collaboration between the agencies, I think it's one of the reasons we help facilitate the passage and now hopefully the appointment of a national cyber director so that we have somebody in charge, somebody can be held accountable, and somebody can force that collaboration. So I'm looking forward to meeting with the nominee here shortly, and hopefully we can get that individual confirmed and on the job and being held accountable. Mr. Wales, there's not a problem since I've been here 10, going on 11 years, that the solution isn't always more funding. CISA's budget's around $2 billion a year, correct?
Correct.
DHS total about 2.6. The federal government in total for 2021 will spend almost $19 billion on cybersecurity. But in the real world, that's a lot of money. Have you done kind of a soup to nuts, zero-based budgeting to determine what it is, how you're already spending the $2 billion? And let's face it, whether it's the OPM hack, the SolarWinds, just keeps happening. And again, this is not an easy issue. I understand that. But unfortunately, I've been in this role now for many years and listening to kind of the same bureaucratic explanations, the same collaboration, information sharing, which I think is all important. But these problems are still happening. Have you really done a deep dive in terms of what CISA does and what these agencies are spending all this $19 billion on?
Sure. So I can certainly talk within CISA. We have looked hard at our budget to make trade-off decisions about where we need to invest our resources, to be smart about ensuring that we're applying resources in the areas that need it most. I think that the challenge that we face across the entire United States government is twofold. First is that we're in a bit of a technology and cybersecurity deficit, that we have not invested to the degree necessary over time, particularly in modernizing legacy systems that have vulnerabilities.
Should we maybe the $1.9 billion COVID relief package maybe put some of that $1.9 trillion toward this? Or if we're talking about infrastructure, should we maybe be, if we're going to spend money on infrastructure, spend it on that? And I want some short answers here because I've got a lot of questions.
Sure. So I will say that we believe that any infrastructure development should have cybersecurity, security, and resilience built in up front. I'll leave it to you about how best to achieve those goals. But I just want to make one really fast point, which is the challenge in cyber is that the threats and the technology are advancing substantially. So technology that we deployed 15 years ago needs substantial modernization today to ensure that it keeps pace with the threats that we're now facing.
And the federal government has a hard time keeping pace. Let me just ask you, have you connected the dots? Or are you trying to connect the dots or looking to see if they're connected between the SolarWinds hack and what happened to Colonial Pipeline? And the reason I ask this is my concern about what happened to Colonial Pipeline is it's just a shot across the bow. I mean, these hacks, what was achieved with SolarWinds is it's gathering information to be used at some point in time. Are we looking seriously in terms of how they may use that information and whether or not this might have been connected to the Colonial Pipeline?
We are looking hard at the information that the adversary gleaned from SolarWinds, looking at reflections in intelligence, and the FBI is actively investigating the Colonial Pipeline incident. What I can say is they've positively attributed this incident to the DarkSide ransomware crew, which is a criminal enterprise. And it is not surprising that a criminal enterprise is going after increasingly important targets for ransomware operations. We've seen this over the past 2 years. They're going after bigger players to get bigger ransoms. Ransoms last year went up to around $300,000 for the small ones and millions of dollars for the big ones. So it is not a surprise.
Right. We understand that's a problem. Again, we're trying to figure out how to prevent it. I want to shift a little bit in terms of the vulnerability of our electrical grid, because that's really, to a certain extent, what the Colonial Pipeline hack is about. We saw the Texas power outage. As we move toward the Internet of Things, as we become more and more connected, we become way more vulnerable. As we move toward this green energy utopia, I'm highly concerned that we are making our electrical grid even more vulnerable to these types of attacks. Again, that's what I'm saying. Is this just a shot across the bow? I don't think we have even come close to addressing the vulnerability of our grid. Again, infrastructure package, I'm not hearing anybody talk about purchasing in advance these large power transformers that could be wiped out in an EMP, GMD, or a cyber attack, and they're irreplaceable, basically, in a short period of time. We're just not thinking through how incredibly vulnerable we are. We're shutting down nuclear energy plants. The fact that we are allowing homeowners to tie into the grid, to sell back energy from their solar panels, address how unbelievably vulnerable we truly are in our electrical grid, and how a move toward green energy is probably making us even more vulnerable. Is that something CISA is really looking at? Because you're way more than cybersecurity. You're about infrastructure security.
Sure, and we are working very closely with the Energy Department as well as the Transportation Security Administration, which is responsible for security of pipelines, particularly focused on natural gas pipelines that are feeding electric power generating units across the country. We have worked hard to do assessments on pipelines, particularly looking at their SCADA systems, their industrial control systems, the operational networks that manage and run these complex systems, to provide as much as we can in terms of advice, recommendations for improving the network architectures, making improvements to their baseline level of cybersecurity, how they can improve network segmentation to avoid disruptions on business systems impacting operational systems. So that has been a significant focus of CISA's work over the past year.
But again, would you agree we're becoming more vulnerable?
I would say that
rather than creating island grids, we're becoming more and more connected and leaving us even more and more vulnerable. Is that correct?
What I would say is that because of the deployment of technology, we are becoming more susceptible to cybersecurity risk in more parts of our infrastructure, more parts of our manufacturing, more parts of our healthcare, and we need to work hard to ensure that we're providing security around those new systems.
Well, thanks for that answer. And Mr. Chairman, I would like, certainly this committee, and I'd like this administration to really focus on the vulnerability, because we're not. And we're not making the investments, for example, in those large power transformers. They're irreplaceable, basically, in the short term. We're just not recognizing how vulnerable we are. Thank you.